So I'm Tim Sly. I grew up in south of England. I was educated in Swansea, and I've lived here in the Wrexham area now for about 7 years. I've been active in politics for a long, long time. I have been, in my time, a county councillor. I'm currently a community councillor in my village, and I've stood for the Lib Dems in the last general election and also in the last Senedd election. What excites me most is the idea of getting people working together. All the indications are that none of the parties are, whoever wins the election in terms of being the largest party on May the 8th, it's very unlikely that they will have an overall majority. And I believe that when you get people from different parties working together, you tend to get better outcomes because you have different points of view rather than just one party doctrine deciding policy. So that's what excites me, being able to be a part of hopefully some rational decision making to help people in Wales. There are lots of local issues. I would say the two that keep coming up, the biggest one of all is health and the universal frustration with the state of the Betsy Cadwallader Health Board. There are two ways we can fix that. I mean, first of all, in its current form, it's not fit for purpose. I can't tell you what the right structure is. All I can say is that a lot of the problems there are long-standing and probably predate even the formation of Betsy. Many, many years ago, I was offered a job at Ysbyty Gwynedd, and I was offered the job and turned it down because I realised I'd be working in an absolutely toxic management culture. I thought I'd last about 5 minutes. So we need to look into that and decide what is the optimum structure. However, the real pressing problem now is people, just the wait for treatment, the wait even to see a GP, the number of people who are stuck in Welsh hospitals who are fit and well enough to go home, but they can't. They're stuck in a hospital bed because there's nobody to care for them, which is why our sort of flagship policy on this would be to massively increase spending on social care, get people out of hospital beds, back into their own home or into an alternative care setting, and free up some of the backlog for elective operations, and also some of the backlog in A&E, because if there are spaces on the wards, then you get rid of the corridor care, you get rid of some of the ambulance backlogs as well. Another problem that comes up, and I don't have an immediate solution for this because, again, it's not a devolved issue, is just this appalling state of mobile phone coverage around the Wrexham area. It's unbelievable that for the fourth city in Wales, that for large areas around, you cannot get a decent signal. And people rely on that. They rely on that for their work. We've got a lot of people working from home who can't yet get a decent broadband signal. They're reliant on mobile. And we've got almost third world levels of mobile coverage. So not something within the competence of the Senedd, but something that I will campaign to try and improve. What this highlights is the disconnect between our healthcare system in the NHS and social care system that is primarily the responsibility of local authorities. Other countries do it a different way and have integrated bodies that are managing health and social care together. And I think we need some sort of national care service in Wales. That would also turn caring into a more valued profession. Right now, people who take on care jobs are paid minimum wage very often. They have appalling working hours and conditions. They have, in many cases, very little job security. If we say that we value care and we want to use that as a vehicle to break the backlog in the NHS, not just to get people out of hospital, but by caring, say, for elderly and frail people, hopefully avoid them having to get into hospital in the first place, then we need to put in place something that gives people a proper career structure, an ability to progress, make it something that people actually want to do, rather than a job that they take on because there's nobody else to do it and there's no other work for them. Well, first of all, the only poll I trust is the one on May the 7th. These are the same polls that in the general election a couple of years ago had us on 20 to 30 MPs and we ended up with 72. So I think the polls can paint an average picture across the country. it's clear we are targeting our efforts onto certain areas, and we do expect to make gains on May the 7th. So in terms of what voters are missing, I think in a six-party system now, we definitely struggle to get media attention, and it's one of the reasons why we get criticised sometimes for doing stunts as a party. But if somebody sees Ed Davey fall off a paddleboard and make a fool of himself, then he can do a serious interview about river and sewage pollution rather than just being ignored by the media, which is unfortunately what happened. We do really struggle to get enough media attention, and that's part of it. In an ideal world, we would like to replace the business rate system altogether, because that's one of the biggest blights on the high street. I think also the fact that so many units on the high street are owned by property investment companies who are driving returns for their shareholders, who are remote and have no interest in, say, the well-being or the health of high street in Wrexham or Buckley or Connors Quay. They're just absentee landlords. That complete reform in terms of replacing it with something else, I think is going to be some way off, because when you look at all the other alternative systems, there's nothing that pops out as being perfect as a solution for that. But we have to decide what we want our town centres and our high streets to be for, and you can't have them just as deserts or just full of nothing more than hairdressers and bookie shops. They need to be vibrant places. We don't want people to just be sitting at home, order everything off Amazon, and that means that we need to do more to encourage our high streets. Possible change of use. I mean, if you look at somewhere like Wrexham City Centre, it's probably twice the size. If you were building Wrexham City Centre for the level of business activity and everything that it has in it now, it's twice as big as it needs to be. So what do you do with that space? And I think what some cities in other parts of the UK have shown is that they can turn city centres, town centres, more into places for living as well as just shopping. And that in turn brings money back to the economy, because then people are patronising shops, restaurants, cafes, other types of businesses, as well as just high street shops. So I think there are models there that we can follow, but we really need to do something, because it's a real shame when you walk around Wrexham at the moment, you see so many empty shop units. Because we believe in a federal UK. We believe in Wales as a vibrant part of a family of nations. What we have at the moment is a half-hearted devolution, where we're allowed to have some powers to decide, that the Senedd can decide policy on, but Scotland is allowed to decide a different set of powers, actually rather more. And the Assembly in Northern Ireland could do something different again, and then all the different city regions in England that are being granted devolution on a piecemeal basis each get a bespoke thing. Well, you can do that, but you can't do that. And what I would like to see is a common set of rules where Wales, Scotland have a level playing field, where we're allowed to decide things like, Scotland can decide not just the rates of income tax, but the thresholds and the bands. Wales can't. Scotland has used that to ease the tax burden on lower paid families. It does mean that some people who were better off pay a bit more, but I don't see a mass exodus of wealthy people coming out of Scotland. I think, places like Edinburgh are still considered to be rather an attractive place to live. So I would like to see powers like that for the Senedd. I'd like to see an even playing field between the different constituent parts of the United Kingdom, and I'd like to see the central government in Westminster really doing a lot less. Focusing on the things that you have to do at a national level, like foreign policy, like defence, and devolving far more to the nations and regions of the UK. I think I'm most proud of our policy on social care, and I'm proud of that because, number one, I think we're the only party coming forward. Everybody talks about the need to spend more money on the NHS. Every party says, oh, we're going to support the NHS. It's a sacred cow, and the NHS, for all its faults, has the lowest overhead admin cost of any healthcare system in the world. So when you hear other parties talking about replacing it with an insurance-based system and things, what they're really talking about is limiting access to healthcare for the poorest people in our society and to the benefit of richer people. I think I'm proud of the policy on social care because I think it implies an honesty that we say you cannot have better services and tax cuts at the same time. That if you want public services that you value, if you want an NHS that works, then you have to be prepared to pay for it for a limited period of time to buy the headroom to fix the system. And it's something that's very personal to me. 10 years ago, gosh, a little more, 12 years ago, my dad went into hospital in South Wales for a routine operation. He should have been out in 2 or 3 weeks. He stayed in there for 3 months, getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and eventually died on the day that he was discharged. Now, if we'd had a decent social care package for him, he probably wouldn't still be alive today, but he would have had a more dignified death, and he would have been able to enjoy his last days at home rather than stuck on a noisy hospital ward. I'd like to think we would have helped to elevate the tone of debate, and I watch things like Westminster Prime Minister's Question Time, and it's just become a circus. And you watch debates in the Senedd, and yes, they can be a bit performative too, but I think generally the standard of debate is higher. I would like to think that we could have contributed to a set of policies that start to make life easier for people in Wales. One of the things that I really, it's one of my big bugbears is the number of young people who, people talk about problem of immigration. We have a much bigger problem. We have a problem of migration. It's young people leaving Wales because they cannot find high-paid, high-skilled jobs here to develop their careers. So I would like to think that in 5 years' time, Welsh Lib Dem government would have encouraged more businesses to set up here, whether that's inward investment or whether that's creating the conditions for small businesses to establish and particularly to grow. It's quite easy to start up a business in this country. It's very, very difficult to scale it and take that step change in terms of jobs and turnover and the amount of tax that you give back to government. I'd like to see reform of the business rate system to be fairer to small businesses, but what I'd really like is conditions where we're providing the further education and higher education that is tailored to equipping our young people for the high-wage, high-skill, high-tech jobs of tomorrow. And here in North East Wales, we're uniquely well placed for that. We've got the biggest sort of agglomeration of industry around the area between Wrexham Industrial Estate, Airbus, Deeside, Cly, and we're well connected geographically. So it's a very good prospect for businesses to do inward investment, and I think it's an attractive area for people to set up and grow from scratch. We have to make sure that as they do that, that the opportunities are there for those high-skill, high-wage jobs to go to young people from Wrexham, from Flintshire, rather than people coming across the border. I've got nothing against Scousers, but I'd rather the jobs went to local people. Because we're being honest with people, because we have a proven track record of working with other parties in the Senedd to advance policies that make people's lives better. Last year in the budget settlement, we were able to negotiate to get 110 million. Well, actually, we went in with an ask of 105 million pounds, and by the end of the negotiation, we'd got 110 million pounds out of Welsh Labour to go towards our priorities. More money for childcare, more money for social care, money to enable local councils as seed funding to unlock extra funding for them to start fixing the potholes. And I could list a whole lot more. But we didn't do that alone. We did that because we're able to work with other parties to get things done. When I was a councillor, I was on a unitary authority that was Labour dominated. I quickly learned that if I came up with a good idea, it would be shouted down. If I whispered in the ear of a Labour member and let them take it forward, I could get it done. They might take the credit for it, but I'd end up with the benefit for my constituents. So I'm not proud. I haven't really got anything to prove myself. I'm at an age where I could comfortably sit back and retire, but I feel I can either sit and whinge about things or I can get off my backside and try and do my bit to change them. What you'll get by voting Lib Dem is a party that's proven track record of working with others for the benefit of Welsh people, and you'll get honesty, and that's a commodity which I feel is in precious short supply at the moment.